Greetings and welcome to Retention Chronicles, the podcast with learnings from expert e-commerce brands and partners. I'm your host, Mariah Parsons. If you're here, you're either on a quest for e-commerce enlightenment or you accidentally clicked the wrong link. Either way, I am thrilled you stumbled into our corner of the internet, and I hope you'll stick around. We've got pearls of wisdom for everyone, whether you're running a multi-million-dollar business or simply just starting out on your entrepreneurial journey. Before we unleash the brilliance of today's guest, let's give a shout out to our podcast sponsor, Malomo. Malomo is so much more than just another Shopify app. They're post-purchase wizards, making beautiful and branded order tracking smoother than a jazz solo, so our amazing founders, like our guests, can keep their customers happy and up to date while they track their orders. So hit that subscribe button, like it'll increase your LTV overnight, and go listen to our other episodes at gomalomo.com. That's GOMALOMO.com. Get ready for insights, chuckles, and perhaps a profound realization or two with this newest episode of Retention Chronicles. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retention Chronicles. I'm super excited for our guest here today. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be a blast. I already know. I'm going to have you say hi to our listeners and kick it off with an introduction of yourself.
What up? Thanks for having me. I love doing podcasts, so I'm stoked. I'm always flattered and I love talking about all things biz and rags and life. So yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, perfect. I know we've already been connected, obviously, so cannot wait to dive further and learn more about the business side of things. But let's kick it off with just a brief overview of your background. You can go into as many details or as not as you would like, but I always find it's great for our listeners who might not be familiar with yourself or RAGS to kind of give a little bit of a lead up into where we are currently sitting.
Yeah. So it's actually been 10 years this month, which is crazy.
Love it. Early 10-year anniversary.
Totally. Yeah.
Happy. Yeah.
Full on decade, which is insane. So I started RAGS. My youngest at the time was almost one. And I have always been kind of into fashion. Always was like making stuff for myself, making stuff for my older two boys. I have three boys. And
that must be a fun time.
What's that?
Must be a fun time with three boys.
Oh,
I'm sure you're never sitting.
Yeah, just permanent MMA referee.
Yep, there you go.
But it's actually really fun too. They're the best. So my youngest, at the time I wanted some clothing for him that was like not cheesy, that was easy for on and off. And he was so wriggly. Like anytime I would change a diaper, I loved the idea of a one-piece outfit because it's easy, but I hated how cheesy they were, and I hated the snaps, along the inside. It was like you end up changing their diaper and then just not snapping that thing back up, especially if your kid's like rolling around or whatever.
Yeah. So, I'm sure they unsnap too while they're just moving. Oh, totally. And then you're like, why did I even put in the effort? Yeah.
So, that was kind of what spun my idea. I guess I should even back up further. My husband at the time was in law school, and we literally had no money. Like we were on food stamps, Medicaid, like zero money for real. It was poorest of poor. So he was getting done with school, and we had that summer, and he was gonna be studying for the bar, and I was like, how are we gonna make ends meet? Mm-hmm. So I actually started an Instagram, Rags to Rachels, and it's actually still that.
I actually saw that and I love it.
And it was mainly just to sell my kids hand-me-down clothes on Instagram. It was kind of a new platform back then. And I, wanted to see if I could make some extra money. So it ended up going pretty good.
I'd say.
Yeah.
10 years later. Yeah.
Totally. And I had experience selling clothing, like selling clothing for adults prior to that. Like I would sell my stuff in skate shops and whatever. And I ended up burning out. And so this whole idea of like half of the burnout was because I didn't want to be sewing forever. And two, I hated that the retailers took half of my money, just to carry my products. So the whole idea of like Instagram and reaching people through social media and being able to sell on that platform was like so freaking cool because it was direct to consumer, you know?
Yeah.
So I was selling hand-me-downs in conjunction with my Wrigley toddler at the time, I wanted to create something for him. And I went in and grabbed a t-shirt out of the closet and cut into it what we now call as a rag, but
Mm.
it's a one-piece romper and you slide it on and off through the neck. And I put it on him and it was so cool. I was like, dude, that looks so rad. It had like it's like not cheesy, but it has the functionality just what I wanted. So I posted it on that Instagram and immediately I was like, people are into this, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so I couldn't sleep that night. I was laying in bed thinking, holy crap, I actually could totally do this. And I
Wow.
had some experience prior. And I remember when I got burned out, I was like, dude, the next go around, like you will know exactly what to do because to avoid burnout, you know?
Hmm.
And so I woke up that morning super early and came up with like a plan and went to Home Depot, bought like this big whiteboard that I could photograph stuff on with my phone and went and got like a bunch of wholesale t-shirts, cut into them, created patterns myself. Like I literally started completely from scratch. And the first like time I had launched we sold out in like minutes where
Wow.
I was actually saying like this is how many I have in this size and I would post and people would be putting in their PayPal emails and I would go in I didn't even have a website. I would go into
I
pay
love it.
invoice them and then it would spit off a shipping label. That's how I started. So I did
Do you
that
know what the, not to interrupt, do you know what the size of your following was at that point? Because I'm so
dude, it
curious if
was
you were
not
doing
big.
limited drops.
It
Wow.
was not big. I think it was like 3,000 people.
Wow.
Like and I just grew that through the hand-me-down stuff.
Hmm.
So it was not big. And then, slowly I started recognizing like I really want to get my products in people's hands that are people that I would want to be wearing rags.
Yeah.
And they would post and then we would snowball, and it started like snowballing pretty fast. In fact, we were highlighted in Huffington Post after like 8 months of doing this. And I actually built a website after that first go, having to invoice everybody. It sucked.
I'm
So
sure,
I
yeah, you
was like,
you were
hey,
real tired of that real
yeah,
quick.
I'm done with this. So I started a website and then about 8 months in, I ended up my nanny at the time was like, dude, Shark Tank's here. She's in Salt Lake, like they're in Salt Lake.
Mm.
And she was like, I'll come early so you can go up there. You should do it. And I was like, no way. So I totally did it on a whim. And I ended
Wow.
up being the last person to get in. Like the producer ran out, grabbed me. He was like, they're packing up, but you can go in if you want. And I had no idea what I was getting into.
Oh
I
my
knew
God.
I had a cool story and I knew that I had great numbers. And I walked in and pitched my story to these producers and it usually was supposed to be like one-on-one, but they ended up like loving it and they were like, we're all eating lunch. Can you just pitch in front of all of us? So I was like, sure. So I actually ended up hanging out with the producers of Shark Tank for, a good 10 minutes instead of like three. And
Yeah.
they gave me a call back. I went on Shark Tank. After that, it's totally snowballed and we had Disney reaching out, Nordstrom reaching out, Star Wars,
Wow.
all those people. So I actually said no to everybody right out the gate because
Wow.
we were so small and we were trying to keep up with our own current demand. But eventually we started selling in Nordstrom, had partnerships with Disney and Warner Brothers and Star Wars. And we just recently launched Mattel. So we just recently
I
launched.
saw that.
And yeah, like 10 years later, a lot has happened. You learn a lot. There's mega growing pains and we're still here,
Yep.
That's part of being an entrepreneur is every day you're like, dude, am I going to last? This is insane. And 10
Hmm.
years later, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Congrats. That's huge. I feel like every single guests we have on here is the common thread with everyone is the disbelief of still being here and still wanting to make it work, which is always, I think, a great reminder for everyone who's our audience is mostly founders who are starting out, like smaller. And so I think it's a great reminder to hear 10 years later, growing pains and all that aside, you're still kicking and
Yeah.
able to partner with huge names in the space. Do you remember what size or like how did you kind of know that okay, now is the right time to open the floodgates of these other, the Nordstrom, Disney
Right.
partnership, Mattel? How did you decide when the timing was right?
I mean, it was so early on that I didn't really understand who my consumer was. And I knew that
Mm-hmm.
if you go into something like that, those types of bigger businesses or bigger deals can end up like really owning you and your brand. You can either
Yeah.
become a licensed product and that's it, or you can be a Nordstrom brand and that's it,
Mm-hmm.
and they really can dictate how you do things in the future. And I didn't want that, I think
Yeah.
you start your own business to avoid that, right? So I mainly that was, and I knew that if I was gonna do it, I wanted to do it the right way. Like
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that when it was done, it would be done very much in a rags branded way. And we would have a foundation of our own, like solid consumer before we go and do something that big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like as you were saying that a metaphor of like having rags and then like a Disney lens or something over it versus going through a strainer of like a Disney first and then
Totally.
customizing rags to be
Yes.
um or like tweaking or tailoring rags to be what they are expecting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask because you started out with the like limited edition drops, what was
Hmm.
that like? Because I see like I have a couple of brands that are that have drops and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get it's like as
Totally.
the consumer side, I'm like, it works so
Right.
much that FOMO marketing.
Right.
Or just like they sell out of stock really quickly. I don't know if you're familiar with Passion Footwear. I feel like they're on the
Oh,
up and up right now.
no.
I'm like shouting her out left and right
Oh,
because
I
I'm
love
like I just want I'm a big fan.
so cool.
But they're convertible heels. So you can take off the heel and then they'll turn into flats
What?
and they're so cute. I'm like I need those in my life, but every single time I check the website is sold out in my size. And so she right her all of her social media she's like I know we're working hard, it's just that's how life is life is as a founder, and I get it because I see it firsthand, but it
Right.
doesn't stop me from wanting it as a consumer.
Totally. It's so funny you're saying that because it really is so counterintuitive. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you don't understand what you're just explaining as like an operator, that because so many times people would be like, you're leaving so much revenue on the table.
Yeah.
And that is the case, and there's probably there's good moments and chunks of time with rags, especially where I felt like we were totally underserving our customer and it was
Mm-hmm.
frustrating. I think my theory is always like service 90% of 100%, to
Yeah.
always keep people wanting to come back. And what, I mean, there's two parts to that. Like I started doing that 10 years ago, really out of necessity. It was like I couldn't afford to go into manufacturing and do 2,000 pieces per print right out the gate. That would kill you. And I think a lot of people that are starting a business make that mistake and then they're just drowning in inventory and eventually they have to just fire sell it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, I'm going to go to the fashion district and buy remnant fabric from all these great brands that just are selling rolls of fabric for pennies on the dollar. So
Mm-hmm.
I went and did that. And then I would ship it to my factory and they would cut
Mm-hmm.
and sew. And so for
Interesting.
reals, like I was only allotted a certain amount in certain prints. And I genuinely couldn't make more because I didn't even know where that stuff came from.
Yeah.
And then eventually, you kind of have to grow up because you work with people like a Disney or Nordstrom or whatever, and they'll make sure you do all the testing and it needs to be very legit. And
Mm-hmm.
we still had it legit, but I was very scrappy and I was starting out of t-shirts. So that it kind of came from a necessity. And then, the other part to that was I was thinking, how am I going to get people back to my website? I have no budget. I have photos from my iPhone. I'm using literally only UGC, which is, content that I'm sending product out and getting those photos and posting. Like
Hmm.
I'm setting up timers on my phone and like in front of it, like,
Yeah.
like how am I going to get people back to the website? I can't just keep pushing this black duh t-shirt or this black duh rag. I need to get like more interesting things and have them coming and going. And so it was really beneficial because it constantly kept things fresh and talking
Hmm.
points. And it was like exciting. And I realized like when people were hopping on and buying, there was so many secondary benefits to that. One, there was like this resale market that actually was really good for the brand. And people have a hard time understanding that too, where they're like, well, you could make all that money. It's like, no, I think that's such a good pulse of any brand. If people are able to come in and buy products and then go resell them. I've seen them resell for like $800 used.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, it's wild. And it built this like subgroup of people that became like Uber fans. And then that just snowballs and it's like gasoline on a fire. And it's like people see this and then they're like, wait, what's so cool about that? I need to like jump on that bandwagon and
Hmm.
buy it. And so that was like a very unexpected but really cool secondary part of this limited edition model. There's things about it that are really, really difficult because you don't always not everything's gonna be a slam dunk, right?
Hmm.
So you don't know how to plan properly. And as you grow and scale, it's really tricky. And so we've had to like adjust and pivot and we've made mistakes, but I think at the end of the day, there really is some magic with having that like limited edition, something special and unique about creating like an experience. People talk about the emotion, and if you can tap into an emotion as to why people should buy it from an emotion standpoint, then I think you win.
Yeah.
And for us, it's FOMO. For other people, it's health, or for other people, I don't know. But for us, it's definitely FOMO.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this because I think it is an easy, or maybe not even easy, but a first assumption to make of a limited edition model where, like you said, you're losing out on that potential revenue because you're not able to service all of the customers. But I also think, like we're discussing, there's a lot of caveats that once you start to think through it, it might be a great approach to have depending on your size. In that, if you can't service 100% of the people that are interested in your product, you don't want to service them poorly and then
Right.
lose them as a forever customer. You'd
Right.
rather serve a portion of them well. And this is what I think of as well, of when I am shopping as a consumer with a brand that has a limited edition model, the buyer's remorse of once I finally get that thing is
I
probably
know.
so much smaller
Right.
because I've
Totally.
thought about this so
You
much and I've
earned it,
waited,
man. Yeah.
yeah, to get it. Um, so I think there's like a lot of, and this is similar to life and just e-commerce as well, of just there are ways to reframe something, and being able to tell if something is working for you
Absolutely.
versus if it's not is probably a bigger concern rather than choosing to focus on the revenue or lost revenue, because it
Right.
probably realistically it probably evens out in the end, right? If you're
Well,
generating all this excitement and versus being able to make the sale up front, there's always going to be a challenge with whatever business model you have somewhere along the line, whether or not you're actually
100%.
quantifying that as a challenge.
It's actually interesting because there was a couple of years where I kind of had to step away just for personal reasons. And I had somebody come in that was very qualified, came from like a really um had an amazing background and didn't quite grasp the magic of limited edition and only saw that as like you're underserving your demand
Mm,
and we need to grow, 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 grow. And started buying deeper into products and we saw sales actually drop off
wow.
because people could get it. And it was like they think about it and they like, even when we would do in-person warehouse sales, I'd give them 7 minutes to shop. And like we
Cool.
had
That's
people
fun.
flying in from all over and we give them 7 minutes to shop. And guess what? You would see these people lined up all day going back in line, because there is this like they're
I have to
standing.
get it.
And our biggest thing was like, don't let them stand in line too long, because then they start to think about they start to think about their purchase, and they're starting to like, talk themselves out of certain things, where we want to catch them right when they're like, I don't care, I just have to have it. And
Hmm.
so it really is like, again, it's very counterintuitive, but you would rather sell 100% of your inventory at 100% margin than have to liquidate, 50% of it because you bought way too much and maybe you could have made more money. You're losing money at that point,
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
not having to discount it. You're not having to go on sale all the time, So that was a huge, huge, and I remember it being a real point of conflict with operators that wanted to come in and do this for me. It was like I was always trying to stop them from ordering too much,
Uh-huh.
because it doesn't to some people it just doesn't make sense, and they want to service your demand. So there's
Hmm.
ways to do that. I think Supreme did a really good job.
Hmm.
You come up with a line that really is accessible, because there are parents and moms that do not give a crap about waiting until 10 a.m. on a Tuesday to buy stuff. They just want to get on a website and buy. They just want to get on
Yeah.
the shop. They don't have time for that. And so understanding that too, and making sure you're kind of catering to both types of, it's a different consumer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm a fan of both from a consumer. As much as it annoys me to have it be limited edition,
Totally.
it totally works.
Yeah.
And then also being in the e-commerce space as well as a marketer of just seeing the benefits that if it works for your brand, right? There's some that it wouldn't work for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you see a lot of the what did you call it, like the inventory sales, like people coming to your warehouse to shop? Because I haven't had a founder mention um that kind of approach to me before, and I find it very interesting that like people would fly in to shop.
Yeah, I will never forget this. So we do warehouse sales maybe once or twice a year.
Okay.
And we started taking them on the road, and we did one in Texas, I remember, and we were selling tickets to people to come and pre-shop the night before for,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was like $100.
Mm-hmm.
And we sold 200 tickets in like 10 minutes.
Oh my God.
And so that night, we let everybody pre-shop, and they were spending money so that they would have an opportunity to come and
Spend
pre-shop.
money.
And they would get, I think it was like 15 minutes instead of 7,
Mm,
to shop.
what?
And then, we showed them some cool new designs and stuff that was coming. And it was really cool, like community building. But I remember asking like, who is all from Texas? And probably 3 of the 200 were from Texas.
Oh my
It's
God.
like we had people that had flown in from all over, even outside of the country. That was
Wow.
like a moment that I was like, whoa, this is bunkers, and we ended up having to like, we got there and there's already people lining up, and it was outside around the building camping. So we had to like find some local guy, from the landlord of the space, and be like, can you come and just be security to make sure all these women are safe? Because
Yeah.
we've had some funny stories. Like in Utah, we have KSL, and it's like
Mm,
a marketplace where you can go on there and sell or whatever. It's kind of like a
yeah.
Craigslist, honestly.
Hmm.
And we've had people that are out of state that can't come to a warehouse sale in Utah hire people on KSL to go and shop for them.
Wow.
Which is so funny. It's always like
Yeah.
I remember seeing people like on their phones FaceTiming these ladies, asking them like what they wanted. Turns out it's like guys for hire to go shop these. So, but yeah, we would still time them, and I think that the biggest thing was like get people in and out so that it's that emotion, right? It's like,
Hmm.
and then we would gamify that even. We would seed in limited edition stuff, or seed in new products, or seed in samples, or whatever, that made it just fun for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, I love it. So are you, because I know you said in the earlier days you're going to pick out the fabrics themselves and then ship them off. Are you still doing that, or how are you choosing kind of where like your limited edition patterns are coming from? It or is it more of a strategic, like, okay, look at trends in the fashion industry of like what, like obviously Mattel, right? We're living in a time where biggest movie of the year, so it makes a ton of sense to have a partnership there. But
Yeah.
in terms of, are you trying to be more selective, or I guess, or more intentional around the patterns that you are rolling out? Or is
Yeah.
it still looking at bulk, what you can get for a good price?
No, we actually now have transitioned into a space where we can design our own. We have a
So
really good
cool.
relationship with our factory, and they understand the business, so it's a unique model where you're not buying into each of these in deep things, but overall, finding a partner that understood the overall vision, where it's like we may not be buying 2,000 units per, but overall we'll do 200,000 units over this span of time, but
Mm-hmm.
they're very different prints and whatever. So we have somebody that works well with us, and then we are designing those in-house. And, some of it, I think for me, there's like an element of me in all of them, but it's
Yeah.
kind of random. Some of it's very on trend. Some of it's just random and rags and very much Rachel-esque,
Yeah.
So yeah. It's
Okay,
fun.
wonderful. I love it. I also love to ask founders in terms of, I think we've walked through like the challenges and the successes of a limited edition model, which is great because I think we don't get a ton of exposure to a lot of brands on this
Right.
podcast who are doing that. So I also want to ask, just generally, what other challenges did you have in the earlier days of starting out? And it could be anywhere from operations to, marketing to sales, whatever we want to tackle, because I think it's interesting to hear about. I think a lot of people can anticipate you'll find certain challenges, right? It's you're gonna some at some point bump up against something with, margins. You need to make sure that your numbers are where they're at, so that you can be a sustainable business, or marketing, ROAS, whatever it is. What's one thing that you kind of didn't anticipate being a challenge that is either still a challenge or was in the past?
I mean, this is hopefully going to answer your question, but I think it's important. When I first started early on, I remember listening to a talk about, I was at an event, and the keynote speaker was so awesome, and he was talking about how there are no rules. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as an early on founder, you really you do too much comparing
Yeah.
and looking, and there's real value in watching people and learning from their mistakes and seeing what they did well, and iterating along the way. But I think a lot of people, because when I started this, it was not a thing. It was not a common thing. A lot of people would have been like, dude, you're not getting great margins because your units that you're ordering are way too low. You I don't know. I just and like you're only doing things through social media. You probably need to start getting into retail and do wholesale.
Mm,
Back then, that was like big time. It wasn't
yeah.
as popular to have just a direct to consumer deal. And I heard him, and I think I constantly was like, well, that doesn't like resonate with me, but maybe I'm a fraud. Maybe I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but like this is working, and it's really counterintuitive, and it's not like what everybody else is doing,
Yeah.
and hearing somebody just say that, it was like, oh, that feels so good to hear, because at the end of the day, you're going to grow and scale if it works for you and you're passionate about it, and you're going to figure out the ROAS.
Mhm.
You're going to figure out when is right to do retail. You're going to figure out margin piece. You're going to figure out, it's like that all is inevitable. It's not
Mhm.
something to full on stress in the very beginning. Just do what feels right to you, what resonates with you and your brand and what you're working on. And if it's working, don't fix it. Like, don't think
Yeah.
because not everybody else is doing that you're broken. Because there are
Uh-huh.
rules. There's so many ways that people are growing and building that are so different than what I did.
Mhm.
But it worked for them.
Yeah. And it works for, we don't even, sometimes you don't even know why it works, right? It just
Totally.
does.
And it's like inevitable when you get
Mhm.
into this life, when you get into this world, You joked about it earlier, and so did I. It is such an insane roller coaster of holy shit, what did I just do? And
Yeah.
then the next day literally could be like, I am the best. Like, look at that one. It is the craziest highest highs and lows, but that
Hmm.
is like why entrepreneurs or founders or anybody that's starting to venture down that path are a titch crazy, because that is what like drives them. It's beyond the money, honestly. Money is so cool, but it's beyond that. Those that are really successful,
It's
I
the
think.
rush. Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think that is like as much as I think in e-commerce especially, or someone or a brand that has an e-commerce branch, because it seems so it's not like almost goofy, but it's just like such a crazy fast industry,
Mhm.
and very lighthearted, because I think that's what customers love to see, right? A brand
Totally.
with actually good branding.
Right.
There's a lot of room to play in terms of what that means for your brand and your tone, all that stuff. And so I think it's a good reminder, because the industry is so open in terms of like, these are our numbers, these are our successes, these are our challenges. It's easy to look at someone who is further along the entrepreneurial journey than you are and be like, yeah, but they didn't face XYZ that I'm currently facing, right? And just
Yeah.
make that assumption, because it's so easy to just turn insular and think, this is a problem that I'm only facing because something about me or my business is wrong. So I
Yep.
love the extra reminder of nobody is out here with a rule book saying you have to do XYZ. If you have an idea, follow it. And if it's working, it'll work, right? And
Yep.
having that, I think, like, it's almost not blind optimism, but that
Totally that.
something in that realm, right?
I like say that to my employees because when I went on Shark Tank, it was like, well, yeah, of course I'm gonna freaking get on that thing. Like,
Yeah.
no clue. Even attorneys were like, maybe you should think twice about that because people might copy, blah, blah. It's like, no, like, and then Nordstrom was like, well, yeah, I know I'm gonna be in there someday. Or there's like Disney, like, yeah, of course, why not? Why wouldn't we get that? Like, it
Mm-hmm.
is like ignorant optimism for sure. It's
Yeah.
like you just do though. You figure it out and it's like why couldn't you do that? Like if I'm not an expert in any of that stuff, but like as you go, I think making sure you surround yourself with a really awesome community. And one thing that I've learned is like people want to help. People
Mm-hmm.
love like if you don't ask, that is like shame on you. You should absolutely just put yourself out there and ask for help and people will deliver,
Yeah.
and then eventually, that becomes like something really valuable as you get into these bigger topics, these bigger things of how to scale and how to manage margin and how to negotiate with a factory. And but in the beginning, it's like, dude, do what's working and then you're gonna make little pivots along the way and iterate. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot, nobody would start a damn thing if they thought that they had
Yeah.
all that nailed in the beginning. You would be
Mm-hmm.
paralyzed. Trust me, we still don't have it nailed. It's 10
Yeah.
years.
Yep.
No idea when I moved. Still.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. And two, if you find the one person or the few people that will say no when you ask for help, then odds are much greater for the next person will actually help you. So,
Totally.
I want to double tap actually. I wanted to ask you about, because the elastic neckline is patent pending. And you had just mentioned, there were maybe some naysayers around going around Shark Tank, and maybe that opening the door for people copying you. So, can we talk about that a little bit before we wrap up? Because I think it's interesting just seeing the world in which, when you have something um like a innovative product in the space, it's an easier, I think, easier thought to have of like, someone's going to copy me. Oh my God, what do I do? Versus
Yeah.
just being like, nope, I'm putting it out into the world and we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So what was your thought process around it?
That happened all the time. Once you start doing it and you gain traction and you get more and more eyeballs, people are going to pop up out of nowhere. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
have counterfeit, you're going to have, it doesn't even bother me. I don't think I've lost
That's
one
so
day
healthy and mature. Wow.
because
Like the
it's,
scene in Ted Lasso. Wait, real quick. Have you watched Ted Lasso at all?
oh yes, I freaking love Ted Lasso.
I love it so much. It's like
I
the
love
one
Ted
scene where
Lasso.
he's like,
I know what
yeah,
you're talking about.
he's like, do you know how healthy that is? Right. It's like something about what animal would you be? Right.
I love
That's
it.
exactly what just that reminded me of.
Yeah,
Continue.
I mean, it's kind of like this is a free country and people can do whatever they want, and
Mhm.
there's room for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So and then also just being really confident in my product. It's like, well, you can do that, we'll just do it better. And we're
Yeah.
always going to be one step ahead. If you're copying somebody, they are doing what you had released 2 months ago. You should always be kind of reevaluate, reinventing, and I think it's a shame when people get so wrapped up in that because that's so much energy and time
Hmm.
putting towards something that's not going to help you personally and grow your business. It's like take that time and energy and refocus and go and give it to the baby that you're trying to build or create. I just think it's like they win if you are obsessed with if with the copycat and take it as flattery. Like who cares? You know?
Yeah, you're making it somewhere. You're making a
Yeah.
big enough wave that people are noticing. I subscribe to Chris Mead, the founder of CrossNet's newsletter, and he had one that sticks out in my mind about copycatting because he was like, they like a game, a backyard game, especially. He's
Mhm.
like, I get so many notifications of people, copycatting what we're doing and putting it out for less and they can just make it cheaper and all this stuff. And he was like, at some point I had to tell myself to stop because it
Yeah.
can become all consuming. And he was like, I've so much to do. This cannot be one of the things that I prioritize. Even though as, humans, I think it's like, no, this is we have the inclination to be like, no, this is my thing. Like this
Right.
is what makes me unique or my brand unique. Um,
I think if you can shift that energy of being angry and instead being like, all right, I'm just gonna kick ass more. Like
mhm,
I like good luck keeping up. I'm gonna be better. This is gonna
yeah.
be it's definitely nothing's ever gonna be like rags, do you know? And having that confidence and really like just blocking out the noise is going to benefit you long term times 10, you know.
Yeah. It's that blind optimism that entrepreneurs tend to have to
Yeah.
make it.
Because
I
it's
love
not,
it.
it can get intense and it can be scary and it can, but just making sure like if I wouldn't have been the first on Shark Tank, that probably would infuriating because somebody would have, so it's like, but if I would have paid attention and focused on all the copycats, I may not have been in the right place at the right time to be in a space where I could go and do all these partnerships.
Hmm.
So I think it's a huge thing. It's just where do you want to spend your time and energy? And it's don't give them that. They've already taken something. Don't give them more.
Yeah. Yeah. Protect your time.
Yeah.
Big proponent of that. Well, Rachel, this has been great. I will wrap us up because I know we're approaching top of the hour, but I know our listeners, they are awesome. I truly love doing this podcast because I get to talk with amazing people like you and just pick your brain about everything you've learned throughout your career, the past 10 years of RAGS. So thank you for making the time. Shout out to Liz for connecting us. Liz at Nomad Marketing, Krupta. She is amazing. We had her on the podcast as well. So I'm thrilled to be, having this conversation here with you today and be an avid follower and cheerleader of RAGS.
Cool. Thank you. And likewise, this is so fun.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear it. Makes my day.